Hello. Welcome to Fringe Fridays, presented by USAF. Today we have the directrix of the Richmond Fringe Festival, Carmel Clavin.
That's me.
That's you with your
Hi.
beauteous blue eyeshadow. I love it.
I just wanted to go a little cash for the day.
Just cash. We're in our shelter-in-place abodes. Just going.
Yeah, mostly. My eyebrows match your bookshelves. I just realized.
Oh yeah. Oh man. The mirroring on the Zoom calls. I'm like, what side is it on? Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
For anybody who's watching, if you have comments or questions, please put them in the comment section for Carmel, and we will get to those.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. There's the handy dandy banner. Thank you, Jenny. So the Richmond Fringe Festival,
Yes,
actually had its digital lineup in April. You were the very first digital Fringe lineup, and that was not necessarily entirely due to pandemic-related circumstances. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I suppose that's fair to say. It wasn't entirely due to that. We had planned, and by we, I mean Spectacle and Mirth, the creative production house that is behind the Richmond Fringe. The 4 badass femmes who collaborate inside of that worked really hard for about 9 months to put what we thought was going to happen together. And in the last 3 weeks, it just unraveled into something completely different. But it remained a really fascinating piece of work in itself, and an exercise in community as an understatement. So what it was meant to be was 3 days of in-person partying and exchange of ideas and presentation of work and live double features and immersive challenging gallery work. And I really wanted a flotilla, but it didn't come to pass.
I love it.
But we knew that we had to address something that we hadn't addressed before, although it was our very first year. But it's I've done Fringe festivals before, and the question of access for people who are homebound or who are deaf or who are blind, or who are just chronically ill and can't leave, and or the ableism that comes a lot with festivals, especially, not just like one theatrical place, but the idea of, and you just move freely in between these festival venues. Like, it's just so fun and easy. And it really isn't for a certain population of the human race. And so the other Fringe directors from around the world have been talking about this for a while. So it was time for us to take steps towards having some sort of digital representation, having closed captioning, having that kind of work. So a lot of that sadly unraveled at the last minute, because everything unraveled at the last
everything. It was like,
but it got transformed into an entirely online festival. So we learned a lot of lessons that I was able to share with my colleagues all over the world.
What were some of those lessons? What advice do you have for other Fringe leaders or other artists who are now in the thick of transitioning content to digital?
Pick a platform and be loyal to it. That is my big thing, because if you spend too much time, it is wasted energy if you are constantly looking for the next hottest person in the bar to go home with. Like, pick the one that makes sense and does what you need it to do, at least mostly does what it needs you to, what you need it to do, and then and make friends with it and be loyal to it for as long as that relationship makes sense, and then you can move on in the future. But the idea of like even being in the middle of something and going like, oh, well, we should switch over to that other platform because they let us do that thing that we just came up with, and I'm like, no, You need to commit to what you've done. So we used Crowdcast.
That was going to be my next question. I was like, what platform did you pick and why do you like it?
Well, when we just like sidled up to the streaming bar and were like ordering a cocktail and like hoping that someone would glance our way. Like my colleagues and I, not just at Spectacle and Mirth, but I live at a place called Awesome Town Manor, where there are a bunch of other artist types who work live most of the time, and we all had to completely redo our lives and our work simultaneously. So there was a lot of like, do we use StreamYard? Do we use YouTube? What about rights? What about Facebook? What about, and the other thing is that the mass influx of people onto streaming platforms just fucked all of the streaming platforms, because none of them were anticipating the enormous amount of bandwidth and users that they would be handling simultaneously. It's like flushing all of the toilets in the building at the same time. Like, it never happens. So can the system handle it? So we learned a lot of things about, you should like plug in your computer as opposed to use the Wi-Fi if you're doing streaming. And you should like, here's how you take all of the soft things in your house off of, like, all the cushions off of your bed and your couch to create kind of like sound barriers in a space. And here's the best kind of affordable microphone that you could buy. And here's how you need to learn about lighting. Okay, so you need to put a light there and you need to put a light there. So we did a lot of work once we committed to using Crowdcast, because we liked that it felt like a venue, a digital space, as opposed to just a Zoom meeting. Because Zoom feels like Zoom, and it's the worst. So we committed to Crowdcast because it had, if it sounds too woo-woo, but it had a friendly vibe.
I know, I love that. I love it. I mean, I've loved all the metaphors so far. So far, we've gone up to the bar and we're like, it's 2-for-1 streaming platform night. Let me see those binary digits, like A11 or 01. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make computer nerd jokes and I'm not qualified to do that.
So, we all like just got dunked into the deepest part of the churn, and so we had to figure it out. And we decided that the place that was the friendliest and felt the friendliest, even though it cost more money, not by much, by the standards of budgets, was like $70 a month. Oh, how dare they? How dare they? But was something that we did learn. This is relevant to the fact that we are streaming across platforms here, is that our variety show had burlesque and erotic poetry reading. And so we could not actually host it on Facebook or YouTube because it would violate community guidelines. So we had to organize that show specifically to, like, all of that stuff had to be at this and the second half of the program. And we were streaming, we paid the money to stream to Facebook. And because we were really worried that our audience wouldn't find us or like wouldn't come with us. And that was not the case. We were like, hey, if you want to see the whole show, if you want to hang out with us, you have to come over here. And nobody whined and nobody complained and everybody had a great time. And there was the like deficit mentality of like, but if they can't find us, then no one will love us and then we'll be nothing. It's just like disappeared. So that was really wonderful as well to know that you can step away from something like Facebook or Instagram or YouTube and still have people come with you if they're into what you're saying. So yeah, we learned a lot of lessons about like committing to things and educating our artists about how they needed to film, like things like I said, like pull all the cushions off of your couch and line them up around you, but not in the frame. And we sent out a one sheet, like a technical one sheet that was like, here are links to the microphone that you can get for $40 if you need one and if you're able to buy one. Here is a diagram of where you put your lights according to where your camera is. Here's a link to using your camera instead of your laptop camera. It's it was things like that. And I ended up sharing it with other Fringe directors because they were all going through the same shit.
Yeah.
So it turned out to be both empowering and Sisyphean at the same time.
I don't know if I don't have the definition for Sisyphean in my head right now.
Sisyphus was the character in Greek mythos who had to continue to roll a rock up a hill. And as soon as you would get to the top,
did you flipped and do it all over again?
Roll all the way back down. And
That
do it again.
Definitely feels like an apropos shelter-in-place metaphor.
A Sisyphean nightmare. Sisyphean nightmare. So it was, it turned out to be exactly what it needed to be, but it was absolutely not what we had planned on. That was Richmond Fringe year 1.
Year 1. Oh, so this was the very first Fringe for Richmond Fringe. Oh, so I may have missed that. That is exciting and very scary. That must have been so... Wow, I just have to give you some applause right now.
Thank you very much.
Having an inaugural Fringe season, saying, "Oh, we're going to do this awesome thing. We're accompaniment digital," and then, whoops, no, it's all digital this year.
Oh my God.
Wow, that is impressive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Impressive.
Thank you.
How did you structure the application process for?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Richmond Fringe is a curated profit sharing festival. Mm-hmm. So it is small. I like to call it boutique sized.
Oh, I like that.
So it's a Saturday, Sunday, and a Monday. Mm-hmm. And it's a curated, for the sake not of gatekeeping, but of creating a menu of prepared work that we can appropriately market. So especially in a town that's never had a Fringe festival before, there's a lot of relationship building with the city and with neighborhoods and with the artistic community that already is here before you can just drop something and be like, it's awesome, deal with it. Like it is in
it's an awesome bomb, run you down right now.
That's just colonialism, and we're not into that. We are absolutely about decolonization. No. So the happy Juneteenth, by the way, here from Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the former Confederacy.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
What a time. Yeah. What a time. Currently just pulling down statues and
all kinds of...
I'm very excited to be here for this.
It is a moment. It is definitely a moment in history. Speaking to Juneteenth, as a Fringe leader, what are your thoughts on having a Fringe that is inclusive, committed to anti-racism? What are your thoughts on that?
Fringe has to be those things. It has to be. That is by its nature. Fringe festivals, the best definition I ever heard of a Fringe was from Heather Kroll, who's the director of the Adelaide Fringe Festival in Australia. It's the second biggest arts festival in the world. And she said, Fringe is when the people take back public spaces for art. I was like, oh, I like that. That is sexy. Anarchist and sexy. So I love the idea of that. And I love it, putting it in those terms, because Fringe is it's a very diverse, by its very nature, beast and industry. And there's a lot of different ways of planning it. There's a lot of different ways of executing it. There's a lot of different ways of birthing it into the world. And the people who make it are as diverse as those approaches. And every city, and they're usually by city, Fringe festivals are by city, and every city has its own tone, its own voice. And so Fringe festivals require diversity. They require people to be vulnerable and to take chances. And they, in my experience, encourage those things all to the best of our ability. I've been very lucky that in the 5 or 6 years that I've been a part of the Fringe community, Fringe festival community of producers, that I've never met a single festival producer or director who has had an agenda outside of make good art, contribute to the empathy of the human race. Like, there is no other agenda. That's it. And I love that. And the reason that we keep a curated festival in a profit sharing model is because that's what works for us. Or it was going to. We don't know if it would have worked this year or not, but it turned into something different. But I used to run the Shenandoah Fringe Festival, which is a small rural fringe in the mountains in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. And it was the same thing. It was a curated profit sharing festival. And the point was that the production would assume a lot of risk and the artist would assume a lot of risk, so that we would come to the table as equitable partners, and we would handle, as the team and the production team, we would handle a lot of the marketing and putting people up and running their venues and making sure that everything was run smoothly, and that we created places for people to come together after the fact and share and talk and have a place. Things that were uncomfortable were contextualized, and people went into things not armed but empowered to experience things. So and then the artists brought themselves and their work and their voice and the things that they wanted to express in all of those different forms. And so in a profit sharing model, we do a 50-50 split. So it's literally, we keep our fees very, very low at the front end. And by very, very low, I mean less than $100 to participate. Ooh. Very, very low. And then we split the door with you, essentially 50-50. So the buy-in is very low and the risk is pretty low, but the reward can be very, very high. But it requires that we work as a team and that we listen to each other as a production company as well as with artists. And that flows into the work that we want to do, especially in Richmond, Virginia, which is such a unique place, especially right now, about what can we do as a production company and what can we do as community organizers, because that's what arts are. They are catalysts for the community to come together and to feel together, and they create empathetic communities. Like, what can we do to enable our most diverse representation, not for the sake of diversity, but for the sake of reality, which is that we are a diverse city and we have a lot to work through as a city. So what can we do? Is that more workshops? Is it creating closer relationships with Black-owned businesses or churches in mostly Black neighborhoods? Is it working with the Indigenous community closer? Is it working more closely with the queer community, which I'm a member of? Like, the point seems to be, moving forward, is to not take for granted that Fringe already covers those places by the nature of what it is. And instead, we move towards something that's much more intentional, not for the sake of ticking boxes, but for the sake of the world and the reality that we live in right now, and the one that we would rather be building for the future.
Yeah, I agree. The point you were talking about, why are you committing to this? Some of the most productive conversations I've had with other artists so far is like, are we doing content for the sake of content? Are we including these people for the sake of being like, hey, look at this? Or, are we looking at what is being done and how it is useful to the community now?
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Because it doesn't fit everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, the stuff that they do in Australia is not necessarily going to fit here. And the stuff that happens in France isn't going to make any sense here. And what we do is, it doesn't translate. So it's interesting as an international Fringe performer, as well as a person from the production point of view, to like take something that I've made that's deeply in my own voice and my own experience to other places and have people say like, oh, it's such an American story. And I'm like, I didn't think so, but apparently you think so. Let's talk about that. It creates an opportunity to breathe together and to conspire together. But now we have to figure out how to do that from a safe distance. Because
there's
breathing together is
so many layers on this moment in time. It's very interesting. Yeah. You mentioned tone earlier in terms of the art and the community. And how would you describe your Fringe Festival's tone? Like, I know it's your inaugural season, but what were you shooting for? And what did you do? What happened? The interaction with other artists and people viewing the digital content.
If there's anyone listening in the chat, please feel free to chime in if you saw any of our content. I was saying this before, the phrase that I came up with while we were in those mad 3 weeks between me getting off the plane from Adelaide Fringe to what was supposed to be the launch of Richmond Fringe, is that we toil in hopefulness.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of hard work and a lot of flexibility and a lot of generosity and a lot of hopefulness. So there was one group who changed their staging, I think 3 or 4 times, as the governor kept saying, like, okay, now it's no groups of more than 10. Okay, now it's you have to stand 6 feet apart. Okay, now it's that you have to wear a mask. Okay, now that it's you're locked down. Like, they'd changed they'd been working on this piece for months, and they were changing the staging according to the guidelines because they were rehearsing 4 times a week, and so they had to suddenly figure out how to do this like dance and theater piece from 6 feet apart. It was crazy. And so and in the end they didn't get to do it. Like, literally the day before, we just had to switch them out with another show. It was heartbreaking. But the whole time their director and their cast was being extremely generous and flexible about, like, okay, so what if we did it like this? Okay, so what if we showed up in this place and we all filmed it? Like, it permutated so many different times that it's and it was never really what we wanted it to be. But like I said, it ended up being exactly what it needed to be for this first year and this experimentation with digital.
That's so commendable. Wow, that is
but I would say generous and hopeful. That's and silly. It got real silly. The variety show, which is still up and available for watching. It's 2.5 hours of the silliest shit you've seen in a minute. There's some
the free variety show.
The free variety show is up. The ticketed shows that we did are no longer available, unless you want a captioned version of them, which just get in touch with me and we have them archived with captions. But we did a free variety show. So there's burlesque and there's erotic fan fiction and there's puppeting and there's a rock band and there's aliens and there's robots and it's just madness and it's adorable and there's live singing, and we had a great time. So I hosted it along with my friend Jo Reed-Tigerlily, who's one of the 4 women who helps produce Spectacle and Mirth. So that is still up. I'm sure there's a link being dropped somewhere.
You can do it in the comments.
But it was silly. It was so like,
is it when
like being drunk? Actually, it was like everyone was like, "Where are we? Who is that? Which side am I on? I have no idea. Wait, who are you?" Because I had a co-host just like we are, and I'm like, "Wait, if I go this way," and
when you're trying to do the and you're trying,
as usual, like depending on which streaming platform you're using, like it's different. So it's like just to go gesture forwards as opposed to side to side. It got dumb, and it was really fun. It was really a wonderful time. It was a wonderful time.
It's amazing. You mentioned Spectacle and Mirth again, and that's the organization that Richmond Fringe Festival is housed under. How did that come about? There's 4 of you, 4 badass femme performers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How did you come together, and how did Spectacle and Mirth get brought into being?
Long ago, there was a myth that in the future, 4 beautiful femmes would come together from the earth and from the sea and from the sky and from the volcano. No, I'm kidding. So
I bought it. I was here for it.
I'm clearly from the volcano. So I started Spectacle and Mirth about 5 years ago. It was a solo project, and it was my business. And I ran the Shenandoah Fringe underneath that, as well as the cabaret shows that I would produce, the venue that I ran called The Kettle. So all of my projects were under Spectacle and Mirth. But I like to collaborate. I crave ensemble work. So I have had the good fortune and the good grace to be able to work with a lot of other really amazing people internationally and nationally. And these other 3 women are people who I've continued to work with and run into, and I like their vibe and I like what they have to say. And some of us are very close friends as well as colleagues. And so I just started like pitching it as a, like, I think we could start a co-op and it would be this. And I kept like really like hard pitching, and they were like, no, we're here. I'm here. I'm on the boat.
Like, this is not going away. This is happening.
It's happening.
We're pulling out of the harbor right now.
Right. So it just manifested about last fall, late last summer, last fall, and we started planning the Richmond Fringe as it's in this new iteration. Spectacle and Mirth is now these 4 women, including myself. And so the Richmond Fringe was meant to be a banner project of the production house, because we all have our own work that we do as well that is not superseded. It is kind of like a federation, like in Star Trek.
I love it.
Federation of planets, and we come together to create like new things, but we also do the things that we do. So an aerialist and a burlesquer, cosplayers, singers. So it's really quite cool, but we've been going through the times as they are. And we're also from different places. 2 of us are here in Richmond, and then there's someone in Ohio, and there's someone in North Carolina. So we're regional.
Oh, where in North Carolina? I'm from North Carolina. I'm from Charlotte.
She's in Charlotte.
What?
Her name is Satya Javala. She might be watching. But she is one half of the amazing aerialist duo called Satara. So she's one half of our marketing team. Jerry is the other half of our marketing team. She's here in Richmond. And then our finance minister is Sarah Joy. She's a belly dancer and producer from, she lives in Ohio. She's from Ohio, in Columbus. And I'm here. So and I'm the glamour hobo. I travel a lot.
Glamour hobo. I love it.
Hashtag glamour hobo. So the 4 of us all have different strengths and different angles. And I'm the orchestrator. So because I had done Fringe festivals before, I had more of a familiarity with them, and I'd produced one before. It made more sense for me to be the directrix. My old job title was Grand High Poobah Extraordinaire.
I had made a note of that from where I was like, I wonder if I'm Grand High Poobah Extraordinaire. I love it.
When you're in charge, you get to make up your own name.
You make up your own title because you can. Yeah, I love it.
So we have all sorts of plans about what we could do about, God knows what the fuck is going on with the COVID times, but it's we were thinking lots of big things about like, we'll have a big art car or a small circus tent, and we'll go around and we'll have curated shows and then we'll do Richmond, and then we'll have a flotilla, and then we'll and it was meant to be a thing that would help us grow into a larger than just the 4 of us co-op, because something, at least in the States, that artists really suffer from is a lack of resources. And that's not just financial, that's things like the knowledge of how to manage finances, that's insurance, that's other support systems that allow the work to be done and allow the work to get better. And so in my brain, I was like, but with our powers combined, we can Captain Planet this. And so
Planet.
he's a hero.
Yeah, I love
arts funding.
I love that you mentioned that, like that other stuff. Like, I don't how many classes, how many workshops, how many times in college did I work on like craft, and then it's like I got in the real world and I wanted to do my own shit, and it was like I don't know how to do a budget. What is performance liability insurance? I don't know what that is.
About your cash flow statement.
Yeah.
How is your P&L looking? Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Also I'm gonna say something controversial and say also the fact that arts do not need to be nonprofit.
There you go.
That is dumb. But it is an extension of the capitalist system of the United States. I'm a big fangirl of B corporations, which is, if you're familiar with them, they're benefit corporations, B for benefit. And they have triple bottom lines, which are socially responsible, financially viable, environmentally sound. So it's a voluntary thing, but it's a really stringent set of rules about, like, do you give people paid time off for paternity or maternity leave? Do you contribute, like, if you're a one-woman photo business, like, do you give a bunch of your money away philanthropically? Do you have safe working conditions? Do you pay a living wage? Like, all that kind of stuff. I've got a total boner for that. So I think that we could be building those businesses, and for the longest time, because I was absolutely guilty that that an arts organization is required to be nonprofit because there's some sort of morality in that. But there isn't. There's just a lot of vulnerability.
Like, you work in the arts, you shouldn't actually make a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. There's
That's
a lot of booby traps inside of that system.
Yeah, that's that. That is not something that I had thought about previously, but I'm gonna give that little thought baby some more space in my brain.
Please. And it's also, like, with the incredibly low amount of funding available in the US for, like, the whole thing about, like, well, you could write a grant. I'm like, I would love to know where you're getting your grants. Like, so there's less and less resources. So if you've built yourself into a system that requires, like, grant writing, and it requires grants and philanthropic gifts, then you're digging a grave.
Yeah.
End my rant about nonprofits.
I loved it. Like I said, I have a little thought baby, and I'm going to nurture it, and it's going to live in here. Thank you. I think
I don't have an answer. I just am saying, like, that's a problem. So, like, let's experiment around it.
No, I agree. It is a problem. And you're right. Like, and especially, like, also good things to think about for our post-COVID world, as, like, this, if you think we already had, like, this amount of, when you're talking about resources in terms of grants and other stuff like that, like, imagine how that is probably shrinking every second.
Yeah. I had to sneak into my partner's home for a set for this show. I moved their house plants around.
When we were just chatting before the interview, the plant was over here. Yeah.
Well, I have nothing to lean on because I'm sitting on the floor of
someone. Oh no, I had no idea. I have nothing
to lean on except for this plant. So every time I lean, it kind of jostles. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been getting a kick out of it.
But now that you've pointed it out, the next time you do it, I'll be like, oh no, wait. No. I think this is a great spot for our Fringe Freaky Friday segment. And I got it right. Do you know how many times I've said Freaky Fringe Friday, Friday Freaky Fringe? And I'm the one who came up with the stupid thing.
Horrible.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Grant really quickly, our regular.
Oh, I know Grant.
There's nothing fringier than that. No, there isn't. Thank you.
Grant drove me around Dallas for a few days last year. Last June is when I saw Grant. He's a big help at the Dallas Solo Festival with my show, The Marvelous Mechanical Musical Maiden.
Oh,
so this should be no surprise.
No surprise to Grant. Well, Carmel, if you had to switch bodies and positions with another fringe leader in the world.
Wait a minute. I get to switch bodies as well?
Sure.
You did not tell me this.
So I'm sorry, we didn't make that clear in the Google Doc. I mean, so if you have one answer for one and then a different answer, I don't know, but who and why? Like, why would you? Because like the video, it's like the movie Freaky Friday where they like you get a hold of
all the versions. 13 going on 30. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, exactly like that.
Well, my first one. Now I've got. This is a whole new world of choice. But I think I'm still going to stick with it. My answer was Hannah Illingsworth from Darwin Fringe in Australia, which is currently happening right this moment.
Wow.
Yeah, so I highly recommend that you check out what they are doing. She's a badass. I met her at Fringe World Congress in Adelaide this past February, and Northern Territories is in the opposite end of the country from where we were meeting, which was in Adelaide. So I'm very glad that she was able to be there. She's an artist herself and a community activist, and she's young and like really ready to like just build some stuff and like fuck some shit up. Like I love her. She, because she's a visual artist, has this really cool eye for what we're going to be doing in Darwin, and they do a lot of work, again, like with the marginalized populations, or they aim to. And she was just saying so every week we have a World Fringe Congress meetup, Zoom meetup, where we meet with each other and we have a chat about things while we cry into our cocktails. And sometimes, like one day I stayed up until 3 a.m. to chat with people because they're on Tuesdays.
One day?
Because the people in the UK are running it. Fringe World, World Fringe Network is running it, and they're in the UK.
Yeah.
So they run one at 8 a.m. their time, 3 a.m. our time, and it's like sometime in the evening in Australia. And then they run another one later in the afternoon, which is 4 p.m. Eastern Standard. And so one day I just stayed up because I was like, I'm just going to go to the 3 a.m. meeting.
I'm going to do
it. Just gonna drink a cocktail and go to the 3 a.m. meeting. And I was in bed. I literally had I had nowhere else to be. Like I couldn't be anywhere else. And so I was like, hi everybody. And it was just so wonderful, so lovely to see them. And she was on that call as well. But what she was saying in that call, I'm looping it back, is that because they had to also completely reimagine their fringe because of COVID, it changed a lot of things for them, but it also offered a lot of opportunities. And even though the Northern Territories, I think, has the lowest rate of infection in Australia, and I mean 23 people have been infected with COVID.
You were telling me earlier, that's feels bizarre to me. I'm in the Bronx, so that feels super bizarre to me being in New York right now.
I don't even know. And so so she was talking about how like usually they do this like really big opening party, and because they weren't able to do that because of safety concerns, they decentralized the party into a bunch of other like smaller pubs and art galleries and venues throughout the city, and then so that smaller groups of people could all be simultaneously partying, that they were able to redirect the funds that they usually spend on that big party to a bigger investment in their welcome to country ceremony with the Aboriginal tribe that is the traditional stewards of the land that Darwin sits on. And so that's a big thing in Australia is welcome to country and recognizing the stewards of the land. And so I just think that's so fucking cool. And she's just a gem. She's just like relentlessly positive and just a lovely human. So it'd be really cool to switch jobs with her because it sounds like her community is really, really robust. I'd probably also switch bodies with her, but I'm going to amend that to also say that I would switch bodies with Adam Stofsky from Stockholm, because he's got such style and such presence. So such style, such presence. So yeah, Adam, if you're watching,
she wants to
Friday.
Yeah, that's awesome. There are no wrong or right. There are no wrong answers for Fringe Freaky Friday, and I love that you have two. That's amazing.
They're on the opposite sides of the world from each other and completely opposite genders and sexualities and shapes. They're just great human beings. I'm like, you guys are great.
Great. What you had mentioned, you do cabaret, vaudeville. If you could tell us a little bit about your art and your intro to the world of Fringe, to the art of fringing. What brought you to that?
I actually came to the world of Fringe because I was helping to dress a show for the Capital Fringe Festival called The Bloody Banquet by Brave Spirits. They are still rocking and rolling up in the DMV. And me and my ex-collaborator, we're still friends. We're not weird to call her my ex. She's not dead, and friends. Like shit. She now lives up in Philly, but her name is Melissa Huggins, and she also helped found the Shenandoah Fringe Festival with me. Actually, it's her fault that the Shenandoah Fringe Festival happened at all. Because she's from Jersey, and I was like, "But what if we had a Fringe Festival? We should start that, right?" And she was like, "All right, stand up, face me. Are we going to start a Fringe Festival?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "You got to shake on it." And I shook her hand and she held my hand. She goes, "I'm from Jersey. This is contractually binding." And I was like, "Oh no, we're starting a Fringe Festival." She's amazing. So my first exposure to Fringe was personally was that, and then I saw a couple of Capital Fringe shows in the ensuing years. My first actual experience with Fringe was seeing someone's in progress piece of work that they wanted to take to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which I had always kind of heard about. I didn't really know what it meant. And so I saw his one-man show, and they were, it was free of charge, just like drop a money in the bucket so it can help Daniel get to the Edinburgh Fringe. And that was my real first real atomic brush up against the Fringe world and what it meant and what people did to get to it and what they built. And then after seeing Capital Fringe, a couple of Capital Fringe shows, I started my own. And when I decided to do that, I also realized that I was not the smartest person in the room. And so I should call a couple of other Fringe directors and talk to them. So I spoke to the founder of St. Lou Fringe in St. Louis and Asheville in North Carolina. And also I spoke to someone who's not the founder, but one of the people running Capital Fringe at the time. And every single one of them had very different things to say, but they were all invaluable. And they were all super generous with their time and their information and their spreadsheets. And I think the best piece of information I got was from Asheville Fringe, who are still friends of mine. And they come up to my fringes and do shows, which I find extremely flattering. But they said that the parties that you throw are as important as the art that is presented, because it creates a space for people to talk about what they've seen and how it matters to them. I'm like, oh yeah. So it creates this centrifuge for the artists and the audience to come together. And also because the artists don't really get to see each other's work a lot of the times in festival situations because they're too busy running from one thing or to the other. And like I know that's certainly true at larger fringe festivals like in Adelaide or in Edinburgh, is like you don't actually see other shows. You just end up in the bar in the middle of the night drinking together or sleeping together. And that is how you interact with your fellows. Yeah, it was a crash. It felt very fast, but I think the reality is that Fringe was always coming for me. No matter what. So now I work as a performer that tours at different Fringe festivals with my show, and also as a producer of my own festival.
I love it. I love Fringe always coming for you. I love that. I love that.
It was always sneaking up on me.
Always gonna be there. Always gonna be there. You mentioned that Asheville gave you the opening party party advice. Did you have anything planned? Did you?
Yeah, Shenandoah was similar. We actually, what I found very important, not just a big opening party, but parties every night. In Asheville, because they don't have a headquarters, they designate a different bar or restaurant in the city to be the host venue, I guess, of the evening, which is really cool because it then pumps money and influence into businesses that support the Fringe. For us, we did have places that were our kind of HQ, is what we were calling them. And I don't like to schedule anything past 9 or 10 o'clock at night show-wise, because that's when we want people to go to the party and talk to each other and support the things that we have going on there. And so we booked bands. We actually hired bands, and we had, that's where the variety show stuff was gonna be. Like, it was all meant to be in that like big, densely populated and intended place at night. And that's part of our original part of the original plan with the access question, was that those parties were going to be live streamed, not to the general public, but live streamed to people who needed them live streamed. And so it was going to be more about kind of spreading the net a little wider the first year and learning and listening to what people needed. And then we were going to pivot and make choices for next year based on what we learned and what people reacted to and loved, or what they didn't like or what didn't work. And that's a strange lack of data for the coming year. It feels like if we are allowed to do this again in person, which is what I prefer, because it's never, digital Fringe was never meant to replace in-person Fringe. We'll be starting at zero again, which feels weird. But yeah, that's really, really important to me. Not only because I've experienced Fringe from all of these different latitudes. So I've come at it from, going to Edinburgh just as a person with no plan, packing a gown just in case, just in case. I totally used it. I ended up in a cabaret show and I needed a gown. But I went as just a patron, a punter, and just to see it. And then I've been to places as a producer and a guest, with all of the passes that get me into all of the fancy secret bars and all of the, meet the Lord Lady Mayor of the city and all the stuff. And I've gone as a producer, I've gone as a performer. And so when you come at it from a lot of different angles, it actually gives you invaluable information about how a thing looks and feels when you're holding it in your hands as this like three-dimensional thing. So I find that information really valuable. I don't know what we're going to do without it next year, but we'll have to make it up, I suppose.
Oh, I believe in you. You guys,
Thank you.
you sound like you rock. In the time that we have left, and also the daylight remaining that we have left.
Yeah, I turned up the light on my screen.
You're like, oh, I wanted to ask you where your anglerfish graphic came from, how that came to be, and if there's anything else that you wanted to tell us, where to look for information, how we can give you money. And then that will also it's been on the screen in the past, but if you wanted to reiterate it, that would be lovely.
Sure. So the anglerfish, as you can see, there it is.
There it is.
We're playing the game.
You got the mirroring right.
In the tail on the
over there
screen.
Mm-hmm.
The anglerfish is one of two joint logos, actually. One is a lamp and one is the anglerfish. Originally, they had been meant to be tandem logos for like daylight programming, nighttime programming.
Oh, okay.
Programming. That's not what happened. We just fell in love with the anglerfish because it's so weird. There's a cat has officially arrived. I
was like, is that a cat too? Oh,
this is probably not even my cat because I snuck into someone else's apartment. The anglerfish and the lamp are important because our tagline is "We make our own light," and that's not about being libertarian. It's more about how there is a light inside of us, and our voices generate this heat and this glow. And so when we don't rely on other people to empower us, when we know that we have it ourselves, we can gather our lights together and shine even brighter. And so it is more of a, I guess you could say it's anarchic, but it is more about the communitarian part of being recognized as a light that gathers together with others. So we make our own light. A lamp is this kind of fun shape for that, and it's a symbol of Mercury, which is about thought and communication and messaging and transformation. But the anglerfish is this bioluminescent predator that is from the deep sea. Also, they're only like this big. Did you know that?
Really? No, I didn't know that.
They're tiny, but I did. They're just weird. But our designer built a giant sculptural. Oh my God, I'm going to take you on a trip. Built a giant sculptural.
I love it. We're on a trip.
Anglerfish helmet years ago because he's a sculptor, and the anglerfish, because it makes its own light because it's bioluminescent, it just seemed like it fit. Hey, Stephen, would you be willing to put on the anglerfish?
Put on the anglerfish. Put on the anglerfish.
So I'm going to step over here while Stephen, our graphic designer, whose apartment I've invaded, puts on the anglerfish. So yeah, and we just fell in love with him, and then we realized that everybody else fell in love with him as well. So we just kind of made him the more official of the two logos. But yeah, we make our own light is our kind of most official hashtag. Now, what we have in these times is don't give up the ship. So apparently nautical references, even though wait a minute, I got distracted. Can't.
Ta-da! Oh my God, I love it.
How did he get all of this in here?
Do you like how I'm tilting to see? Oh,
there it is.
Amazing.
Can you give him a spin? Can you give him a spin? Look at that. Look at that. So great.
Up. Oh, this is my new favorite thing.
So Stephen is a foam sculptor and a mask maker. So he takes that out to big, parades and such.
Oh.
But yeah, so that was the thank you. So we have a river running through the city. It's the James. It's a murky, smelly river, and the best of times. But people really love it. It has a lot of romance to it. It's unnavigable because it's so shallow, rocky, which I think is a really good analog for the experience of living in Richmond. If I don't say But as you know, to throw it back to the fact that it is Juneteenth and we've got a lot of this work on our mind, is we continue to toil in hopefulness and not give up the ship. So we have our nautical themes, even though it's not even a navigable body of water running through the city. So yeah, that's the story of the fish. Hopefully, like, we had all sorts of like clever, like wicked clever stuff that we were gonna do around town with like bleach printing on sidewalks and doing like Chia Pet style like graffiti on walls. Fish, do a whole like find the fish thing, and that didn't happen. So next year. Hopefully, when the monuments are down, well, maybe we'll throw an
anglerfish up there. Replace some of them with some angler.
I'm just saying, a big old lamp. Not a gas lamp, because gaslighting is bad.
Yes.
So yeah. So that's the story of the fish, and we make our own light. Did I answer all the questions? I got distracted by this.
Yes. I mean, yeah, you did. And speaking towards next year, if people want to find out more information, they can go to Richmond Fringe.
Right. How do you give me money? How could I have forgotten?
And Carmel at spectacleandmirth.com.
Yes, via PayPal. And if you go in and you watch our variety show, which I highly recommend, there's a call to action at the bottom that says, "Artwork is work."
Artwork is work.
Send us some money and buy us a taco. So that money will go directly to the Fringe and to the work that we want to do in the future, like building scholarship funds or paying artists directly or hiring bands, because artwork is work.
I agree. Well, Carmel, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for spending this time.
It's been such a treat to chat with you, Amanda.
And I wish you the best. I wish you a safe and happy rest of wherever we're going on this crazy journey.
Time is a construct.
There is no time.
Time is a construct. But in six-ish days, you're going to do another one of these. So
yes. This is one of my only, this is how I mark time, is this show.
I know. Well, have a good day. Thank you so much. Bye, Yusuf. Bye, Fringe World Congress. I'll see you soon. Get in touch. I would love to work with you in the future at Richmond Fringe or elsewhere in the world. Mwah.
There we go. Thank you, Carmel.
You're welcome. Are we on mute?
Wait, are we?